Hello, Sales Nation. I'm your host, Will Barron, and welcome to another episode of the Salesman Podcast. On this episode, we have Jack Kosakowski, and we're diving into social selling. We're putting it super into context. We're talking about specifics, not is social selling the new best thing, is cold calling dead, not that kind of conversation. Today, we're talking about how many times you should touch a prospect over social before you engage on LinkedIn, before you go for the close, before you go for the phone call, and real practical things like that. We use an example of a little project that I'm putting together at the moment to put things into context. And yeah, Jack is a legend. He is super down in this space. I don't know anyone, in all honesty, that is really on top of it like Jack is. You can find out more about Jack over at creationagency.com. You can find everything that we talk about in the show notes, all the books, all the links, all the videos, over at salesman.red/98. That'll give you the show notes for this episode. And with that, let's jump into today's show. Hey, Jack, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Hey, man, thanks for having me back. Since I was on the show last time, I've become an avid fan of your show. You put out some great content. You've had amazing people on here, so I'm just happy to be back and have the opportunity. Thank you.
You are more than welcome, and you're actually going to be some real help to me and to the audience today. So I talked about it very briefly before we click record then, guys, but I'm going to just go over it again for the benefit of the audience. Obviously, I have one Q3 advertising spot left. Some of you guys will know about this because you've seen it on tweets and some teaser videos I've done, but I'm doing I'm testing social selling, actually, just basically to see if it's worth the hype, if it works, if the traditional sales model is a better way to go about things. And I am essentially testing social selling to sell this final bit of ad space that we've got on the podcast on the blog. So, Jack, let me fill you in of where we are at with this. And so let me go through this so you can tell me where I've gone completely wrong, where you do it differently, because you are the man here, the master of social selling. I put together a prospecting list. So CEOs primarily and marketing directors, marketing managers of the companies that I want to work with. And that I think that, because the problem with this experiment is I get a lot of inbound requests. So I've had to put all those to the side. And these are people that I've not had any contact with them before. So they're totally fresh to me and they're totally fresh to our podcast, blog, audience, and everything else. So there's, I think we've got about 80 of them, the companies that I would work with. So these are sales enablement companies, sales training companies, people like that fit and that we could add value to. I dumped them all in the CRM, so I've got some kind of way of tracking them. My next step was to find them all on Twitter. Half of them obviously don't have Twitter accounts, and it shocked me and it appalled me that a marketing manager in 2016 didn't have an active Twitter account. They weren't leveraging it. And it probably says more about what they are doing in their practice versus this experiment that I'm doing. But so I dropped it down to 40 people, or 40 companies, so 80 contacts. I then went through on Twitter and did the what we talk about on the show all the time of engage, add value, and it was just a step-by-step process, I guess, of getting me in front of them so that they breaking through that obscurity. From there, I started adding a couple of people that I'd got conversations going with on LinkedIn, and this is where we're at, Jack. So, first off, how have we done so far? Has this been a total runaround and backwards, or does that so far make sense to you?
Yeah, so I love the targeted approach, right? Most people get lost on social, especially salespeople. It's like, 1 minute we're prospecting, next thing we know we're looking at our ex-girlfriend's Facebook photos, right? That's how we roll. Sorry if I freeze. So what I would say is that, even narrow it down even more, right? Like take your 10 top accounts. I think 40 is a lot. What I say is put it on a whiteboard. Don't put it in a CRM. Because you'll just get lost. In CRMs, we get more lost than social. And then, what I do is I always go into LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, if you have that, find the top 5 contacts within the account, decision makers, go down to the 3 most social, and put those on the board. So, you'll have your account, your 3 contacts in those accounts, and then put the 10 accounts on there. You'll have 30 contacts. Put those in a Twitter list. Create a targeted LinkedIn list. And I've got some strategies. I'll give you one, right? So the first one I always like to do is kind of the one-to-one thing where it's like, okay, I'm going to go in and look for LinkedIn publish, and then I'm going to tweet it out, tag them, share it on LinkedIn, tag them, read it, engage on the post, ask a question, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get, try to add value to them, right? To give my network away to them, right? To get them some visibility, because what are buyers, like what are companies always looking for? Like all we're looking for is more visibility into somebody else's network, right? We want our buyers to share our message to our buyers in their network, right? Like really that's what like sales and marketing is all about. And then, that's 5 touches. I look at everything as a touch, right?
Okay.
And when I say 5 touches, what I like to do is I like to, mark on the board. So the first thing is, like, if I did that, that would only count as 1 touch, right? Even though I shared it on 4 different channels, it's 1 touch. And then the second step would be to wait till they engage, right? Or if they don't engage, a couple days later, go read about them, go find their blog, share their blog. Make sure you're always tagging people. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, too, is like they share something of somebody's, but they don't tag them in it, and that person never actually sees that you're an advocate for them. And then the third piece is you got to get connected, right? So like if you've got 3 decision makers in your network, but you're not connected on LinkedIn, so the first 3 touches would be 9 touches total with 3 contacts. Get connected, and then when you get to 5 X's on all the names, right? Or if you can't, my thing is some of them aren't going to be as social as the other. You're going to look for the most social one, and then you're going to lead with value to move them offline. Like if you've got 5 X's, like you've done your job, you're visible, you're valuable, and now it's time to move it offline. And I think that if you do this kind of metrics like that, where it's like, okay, add value, add value, add value, now I'm at 3 X's, now I need to connect, leading with value, with personalized messaging from whatever that engagement is, get connected, add value, add value. It's okay if you go over a little over 5 X's. But then you got to go, okay, I got everybody offline, right? Like I'm connected with all 3 decision makers. I've had a little engagement with both. But now I've got to, I look at it this way. I'm earning the right to reach out to the buyer and ask for their time, right? But it doesn't mean that the buyer owes me anything. So I don't want, I don't want that to be, a confusion. Like your buyers never owe you anything, but I will tell you that if you become an advocate for them, and you lead with value with your messaging, and when I say that is like, not reaching out to the buyer and going, hey, I've been sharing all your stuff. Can you give me a demo? Like, can I get a demo?
let me stop you there, Jack, for a second. So, because we're covering a lot of ground here very quickly, and I just want to go emphasize a couple of points here. So, one, which is brilliant, is you've given me already some targets to hit. So, where I was going wrong and why this is taken weeks rather than days, perhaps. Obviously, I'm busy as well, but every salesperson's busy, so that's no good excuse. Is that I wasn't aiming towards 5 touch points or 5 marks on a whiteboard. So that's fantastic from a start. So you've got something to aim for, you've got something to measure, and so you've got some progress that you can make there. So you also mentioned, and I'm guessing that these are all from experience rather than just plucked out of the air willy-nilly from your past previous roles and what you're doing now, but you also mentioned 3 decision makers. That is something that I've only gone for 2. Is that account dependent, or do you think 3 is the magic number, or is it just up in the air?
I mean, it depends on your industry, right? I mean, if you're in technology, you're going after tech companies, you probably need 3, right? I mean, if you're going
who would the 3 be? Obviously, it depends on the product, but would you be aiming for the user, the decision maker above them, and then their boss? Would you be going in a linear pattern, or would you be trying to just spread yourself around so that someone, no matter where you come in, has heard of you?
Well, that's where buyer persona comes in, right? Like you should know what your target buyer is and how many of those titles you closed last year and what's the biggest deal size. I mean, like marketing should give you that information, or sales should really know it. If you, I would go off of that data. That should tell you where you need to go.
Okay, so we've got as far as narrowing things down. We've got our top 5 prospects that we're aiming towards. We've got 5 touch points, and we've engaged with them all at that point. And then you were doing it, and I do it, and other people come on the show do it, and we all just say, you just need to add value. For each of these touch points, give us, or, obviously the same value can be added multiple times and multiple people. But what do you mean by add value? Give us a concrete example of that. Is this a case of sending them a link, or is it as simple as just pushing them out to your audience?
Well, I mean, here's the problem with social selling is, like, I don't think that there's one way to add value. Like, I don't think there's any circumstance. You can do sharing and all that stuff and whatever. But, that's a bunch of crap, like fluffy talk. Like, we're in sales, right? What is your job in sales? Your job in sales is to get to know your dang buyers, right? Like, get to know your buyers so well that, this is the way my mind works. I see something happen. I go, oh my gosh, they've got a great webinar coming up. And I think to myself, wow, I know that it's valuable to a buyer, right, to get more webinar signups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tag this buyer, and it's actually a really good webinar. I'm going to share it. I'm going to sign up, right? And then I'm going to share it on, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I'm going to tag them. But then I'm going to go above and beyond, right? Like, I might, find my buyers or my customers, and say, hey, you know what? You should really check out this webinar. Like, I know that you guys have wanted to, get some more information on this. These guys are putting on a really good webinar. Maybe I'm going to warm intro on message, like, hey, VP of marketing, whoever that is. Hey, I wanted to introduce you to so-and-so. They're going to watch your webinar, and they might be looking for your product or what you have to offer, right? And sometimes I'm even, I'm always looking for opportunities to use my social network to connect buyers with buyers and connect the dots. So there's so many ways to add value, but a lot of the value doesn't always mean that it has to be a share on social. And it could be that, oh, hey, I see so-and-so is connected to so-and-so. I'm really good friends with both of them. I know what they do, and I know that they need it. I'm going to warm intro on LinkedIn a message that says, hey, you two should talk. I'll call them both or whatever. But use your social network as your connector and your Connectify as value too. A lot of people don't think about that when they think of social selling. They think, like, share, comment, engage. No, it's how can I creatively take my network and get other people, being a connector, and getting other people connected that would give them the possibility to earn business. Because honestly, we are so worried in sales about generating our own business, me, that we forget about the easiest way to really generate business is to get other people connected and be the reason that they got a deal. Because honestly, what happens when somebody gives you a deal or warm leads you, they come to you or you get a referral from them, right? So,
okay,
that's why I would say value is way deeper than sharing, and it's being creative and using your social network to your advantage.
And that's what I wanted to get at there. It's not just tagging people, and that's what I've done thus far. For me, in my mindset now, the next step is for me to, the obvious thing is to start inviting them onto the podcast if appropriate, to get that FaceTime with them. And I've got some other ideas on that. That's the next step. But I wanted to just run through this, and now we're going to look further into the future. So I get them on the podcast. Obviously, maybe that's not a good example because people listening might not have that opportunity. Or maybe it is a good example because maybe they should be doing podcasts to give them the platform to do something like that. So say, get them on the podcast. You've added them on LinkedIn. They know who you are. I think that's the biggest boundary point at first, that you break out that obscurity. You've added value in that you've supported their webinars and that kind of thing. And this is what I've been really intrigued, Jack. Is this where social selling ends and the more traditional sales process begins? Of then they're in your funnel. They know who you are. They probably know what your product is because it's been mentioned or it's on your website or you've talked about it or hinted to them in the podcast, for example. Or does social continue once you are having those offline conversations with them?
So I think this is the where sales comes in, right? So you're going to do, here's the thing about sales, we're always trying to beg people to do something, right? It's like traditional model is here's a phone, call them and beg them. Yeah. Here's email, now spray and pray them and hope that, and cross your fingers. Okay, whenever I talk to VP of sales, this is my favorite question. So let me ask you, so what is your sales team doing right now to, get new appointments, new opportunities? Well, we got lists. We're dialing, we're smiling, we're hitting it hard, man. And then we got email campaigns. Okay, great. So what you're telling me is that your sales team has two tools that are very selfish, and all they're doing is begging and asking people to do something. Well, why don't you do something on the front end and try to earn the right? Just put a little bit more time into it, because that would make a lot more sense, right? Understand your buyer. And here's the best question. Mr. VP of Sales, when's the last time you bought from a cold call or from a cold email, anything? I don't care if it's Burger King, dude, right? Well, I don't. Okay, so why are you training your sales team to sell the way that you would never buy?
And what response do you get back to that?
Well, if they argue with me, I just usually show them how I social sold them onto the call, right? That's usually the easiest way. But, what are they going to say, right? Unless they're going to lie to you, you get your ego, they don't want to give in to this social selling, this stuff, this stuff at work. Okay, well, 2016, it's digital. Buyers want to be more than just the number. They want you to take some time. And here's another piece of value. Value to me is hey, I saw that so-and-so loves the Yankees. Hey, I'm going to lead with value with a Yankees comment, right? I'm going to send a Yankees T-shirt or sweatshirt, in these big accounts. Invest some money. Go look at their Twitter account. They love it. I'm going to engage, talk to them about the game on Twitter, right? I'm going to be me, dude. I'm just going to be me, and then I'm going to go a little bit extra, use that social data that they're giving me that's live data, and I'm going to use that to be genuinely interested in them, and then move over to the product, right?
I've got two things to ask here that I know the listeners will be thinking. I'll tell you them both, then we'll run quickly through each one, and you'll be able to give some insights. The first one that we'll talk about is what you do when someone isn't active on Twitter, when you can't really see what they're doing on LinkedIn until you've added them and that kind of thing. Then the second part of that, which we'll go on to very briefly as well, is what do you do when you've got no social proof through Twitter, you've got no followers, you've got no network, yada yada, all the things that you've got to just suck up and get on with. Most likely is going to be your answer to improve and to build that. But go back to the first point. What do you do when a prospect is not on Twitter? Twitter's the easiest one that I've found through my experiments here with social selling, to just dive into a conversation, to see what people are talking about, and it's fantastic if people are on there. Obviously, not everyone is. LinkedIn is a bit more difficult in the, and tell me if I'm wrong here, because your knowledge of it is far deeper than mine, but until you've added them on there, until you're connected, it's more difficult, unless they're pushing posts out through Pulse, it's more difficult to see and engage with them on there. And then Facebook, I've not really experimented with, because I don't know, I feel it's perhaps less appropriate to add someone on Facebook until you physically know them. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And have you got any tips or angles to go at those kind of prospects?
So if they're not on social, the only really option that you have is to look at your connections and see who they're connected to, right? If they're on LinkedIn, the only way you're going to go about it is to use your network to see, to give you insight on who they may know that could get you to them from a traditional model, or pick up the damn phone, right? The days aren't over where you don't dial. That's not what social selling is. Social selling is really just giving you kind of a competitive advantage, right? And using and being buyer focused. Now, with what you were saying though, is if they're not on social, then you have to go to the traditional model, right? Or there's a point where, that's why I like the 5 X's. It's okay, I've done enough on social, I'm either going to move this offline or it's not an opportunity anymore, right? Mm-hmm. You have to go offline at one point, and that means pick up the phone, send a message, lead with value, just try to get on the phone with them. And, I'm always trying to ask them about them. Sometimes do a demo, right? People don't realize that the best way to do and get into conversation with someone, especially if you're selling to VPs of sales, is reach out and say, hey, I've got customers that are always looking for new technologies. I'd love to see what you guys do. I can't make any decisions, but if I've heard a lot about you. I want to know what you do. And if I see anybody in my customer base that could be beneficial for this, I promise you that I'll warm lead you after this call. And I do everything in my power to find somebody, right? Because I always know that there's someone that could get benefit out of, unless they have a real crap technology, they're in trouble. But which happens. But I want to get people connected, right? But with what you're saying is if they're not on social, pick up the dang phone. Use your network, go to events. Outside of social, if you want to know what social selling really is, I go to a lot of events. That's social selling, right? Shaking somebody's hand, listening to thought leaders, getting introduced to influencers. That's another component of this, right? Is like, see who goes to these events, who's going to be at these events, right? Use social to do that data and figure out what events would I be at that would, get me introduced to some influencers that could get me into their networks, or where are my buyers going this year? So the sales and sales managers need to leverage social data to figure out where they should be sending their salespeople, because I can't tell you how many of these events I go to, how many salespeople, the right ones, which are very few, are getting deals done because of social introduction to a social in-person conference.
For sure. And I can imagine that working out in that you make a list of people that you want to prospect before the event. You do what we just described, so you've broken out the obscurity. They know who you are when you shake their hand and you say hello, and you've almost got an instant meeting that is very difficult to be fobbed off on when you're at an event like this, because the social pressure and the construct is for you to chat to new people and to make contacts there.
Like I always say this, if you want to simplify social selling, it's saying, okay, I want to get visible and I want to get valuable to my buyer, right? And then I want to get connected to my buyer, because people do business with people they're connected to, let's be honest, right? And I want to get connected at multiple levels within the organization. And then I want to, move it offline. I want to go into a traditional sales process. But then what I want to do is I want to take social and I want to nurture the traditional sales process with value before ask, right? It's like, okay, you get on the call, you do the demo, you nail the call, you got to go one more meeting to the next decision maker, but they don't have their schedule, which happens all the time, right? I don't have them, we love this. Okay, so the phone hangs up, the meeting was won, the phone hangs up, and the deal is lost, right? Because from that point forward, you as a sales rep only know how to email, beg, call, beg. You don't know how to get valuable and visible to the CEO that's going to be on the next call. You don't know how to stay valuable and visible to the marketing director, right? Like, you've got to have social infused into the sales process, and then you've got additional things along the way. Social is just your value tool, while the rest, I call them, are the earning right to sell, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And the second part of what I wanted to, and very briefly, because we're coming to about time here now, run through. So you mentioned you've got to be valuable, you've got to be visible, and you've got to be connected. I'm not saying that this is down to new salespeople who don't have the experience or the connections or the social assets. This could be an old salesperson, it could be young, it's irrelevant. What are the first steps for someone listening to this and going, friggin' heck, this sounds amazing, I want to dive into it? What are the first steps that they need to set up, whether it's, is it as simple as just setting up a Twitter account, following people and engaging with them? Is it as simple as that?
No, I mean, yes. So, branding plays a huge piece of this, right? Like, so if you're going to go on social, make yourself look like you are credible enough to do business with. That's the number one thing, right? Second, and that's easy, right? There's tons of articles. The second piece is, keywords, right? So, like, you've got to be optimizing yourself. So it's just like Google search, right? You want to be organic. You want to different key terms that your buyers are going to be looking for, right? Then the third one is you've got to put a content strategy, make a commitment, and that doesn't mean you have to write your own content. You just have to share the right content. And one last thing, and this will make more sense for new people. If you looked at social media as a lake, right, you've got your channels, Twitter, LinkedIn. They all come in, the buyers are the fish. We look out at this lake and we go, okay, we want to go fishing, right? But we're all just scared, right? Like, nobody ever catches any fish without a fish finder, right? So we get our pole. Everybody's got the pole of the hook. We get in the boat. Marketing's kind of the fish finder, right? They're the analytics. They go find, we go to the right spot, we see bubbles, boom, we throw the hook in, and here's what most salespeople do. They throw the hook in, and that's it, right? Nobody's ever caught a fish with a hook, right? So, you throw your hook in, and you got to have bait, right? Content is the bait. The better the content, the better the fish. I always say, like, you put crappy bait on there, you're going to get carp. Nobody ever ate a carp or bragged to their about that, right? So if we put the right content, the right bait, which is targeted content, it's hot off the press, and it's in our feeds, our buyers see it, they come, they like it, they engage, we start conversation. Look at online and social selling is just creating more conversation. The more conversation you start, the more attention you'll get, and if you do it right, you move those conversations offline, you always leave with value, you can't fail, but you've got to make a commitment, and you've got to have a simple process, but you've got to look like you know what you're doing.
Fantastic. Jack, with that, I've got a couple of questions I ask everyone that comes on the show. I likely asked you these last time, but we're going to run through them again. Hopefully that you forgot your answers, and so you give us different answers this time. Okay. Or you're super prepared and you know what's coming. But a couple of questions. First one, who do you think is the world's greatest salesperson?
Oh, wow. I don't remember this question. So my grandfather was, oh boy, he was good. I mean, he started from nothing, and he's not around anymore. He died of cancer last year, but dude, he was the man. He made millions, no, not even a middle school degree, and he used to sell pots and pans to people in their house. Put it that way.
Amazing. Great answer. Okay, what is one book or resource that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
Easily Not Taught, by my boy Keenan. You had Keenan on, right? Yeah.
Not yet.
Oh, you haven't? Okay, so Not Taught is by far right now the book that everybody should read that doesn't believe in the social age. This book's so good that my 52-year-old mom, who's a real estate agent, started blogging when she read it. Put it that way.
Fantastic. We'll link to that in the show notes over at salesman.red. And one final question for you, Jack, and I definitely did ask you this last time, but again, your answers will be useful for the audience, and they're going to be really intrigued from what we've talked about so far. But if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Put the time on the front end to build the relationships. When you're new to, this is what I hate about sales today is and I wish I would have known this earlier, but they come in and they bring you in as an SDR, right? They say, book appointments. There's no buyer-focused activity going on. Most of the time, you don't even know the product, right? Mm-hmm. So anywhere that you go, learn the product better than anybody at your company. I don't care if you're an SDR. Spend your weekends and quit drinking and learn the product, right, inside and out, and then learn the content. I wish I would have known this earlier. Learn the content in your industry better than anybody that you know. I will tell you, content consumption has been the number one driving factor of my success in sales and in my career for one reason. Because I might not have the 10 or 20 years experience that you do, but I've read 40 years worth of content to put me 10 to 20 years further than you, because I can read something and I can consume it, and I can take it from somebody that had to do something for 10 years to figure out what they can write in a blog or a podcast. You can learn a lot, right? So be the master of content in your industry. Know it better than everybody else. And the funny thing is, your conversations will change. CEOs will start to listen to you, because when you know the industry through content and you understand it, you dive into it, you stay buyer focused, you want to know their problems, you really, really care, you love it, you're on fire for your industry, your life will change and your quota will go right with it.
Love it. Jack, absolutely love it. For the audience minds you've just blown now in the past 30 minutes, where can they find out more about you and what you do?
So add me on LinkedIn, add me on Twitter. I'm probably, the most active on Twitter. I freaking love Twitter. At Jack Kosakowski, just my name with a 1 after it. And, just reach out to me. My thing is I'm social as heck, dude. I love to be social. I love to be an advocate for good content. If, sales anybody in sales that has good content, you want me to, read it, you want me to give you feedback, I love doing that. And then the other thing is, I've got a 15-minute link, a 15-minute link on my profile in my summary in LinkedIn that you can book. And I open 2 hours every Friday for sales reps to ask me anything they want. They get 15 minutes. I don't talk about myself. I don't want anything from anybody. But I love to get in the weeds with other sales reps to kind of hear what's going on in different industries. And if I've got anything that can help you, I'll give it to you, man. I'm an open book. So just book that link, click the link, book the calendar, and we can talk.
Jack, you're an absolute pro, sir. And with that, I just want to thank you for your time today, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Dude, I love it. We got to do it again.
And there we have it. I just want to thank Jack again for coming on the show. I think we need to get Jack on more frequently, because he's a wealth of knowledge and he's doing a lot to share these shows as well over social, and it's not going unmissed, Jack. And with that, I want to thank again you, the audience. If you're listening on iTunes, watching on YouTube, we appreciate you tuning in. You can check out everything that we talk about in the show notes over at salesman.red/98. We're nearing that 100th episode, which is exciting. And with that, I'll speak to you again tomorrow.